everyone. You're watching the Asian American Herald new media network featuring the Asian Americans in New York. You can watch a recording of this show and all of our previous episodes from our Facebook page, Asian American Herald of the Capital Region. My name is Shruthina Tanmai, and I'm a student at the Fashion Institute of Technology, a writer and creative who was born and raised in the Capital Region. This evening, I'm super excited to speak with Annu Subramanian, an author, human rights activist, and the Tri-City India Association Board of Directors Vice Chair. She's based in Albany, New York. Annu, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. So I'd like to start by asking you to take a minute to introduce yourselves and tell our viewers a bit about your background and where you grew up. What are some of your interests?
All right. So, as you pronounce my name so beautifully, I'm Annu Subramanian. It doesn't happen very often. I am currently an author and a human rights advocate. And my focus is on addressing domestic violence, violence against women in general, and also human trafficking, child trafficking, and also sex trafficking. And I am a former teacher. I taught for about 25 years. I taught children from Montessori school all the way to seniors in high school. And I taught mostly literature and writing. And I do teach one-on-one basis now, like writing, editing consultations, which helps me stay in touch with students, interacting with students, which I miss terribly because I don't teach full-time anymore. So that's me.
Awesome. So what piqued your interest in writing?
As my father used to say when I was young, I used to write bits and pieces of paper, literally, a scrap paper here, there. He was my mentor. He read a lot when he was a child. So he shared that love with me and encouraged me to read. He was an excellent storyteller. Before I went to bed, he would tell me, the gods, demons, and other stories. And that got me into, just submitting a poem for a competition here and there. I remember writing about Jawaharlal Nehru when I was in middle school, and I got the first prize, and I thought, wow, even I can do some writing, So that somewhat started me on the journey, but I never took it seriously. Every father, I'm sure, tells his child, oh, your writing is amazing. So I didn't take it seriously until I went to Union College. And my thesis advisor saw some of my writing, and she said, there's something in here. And she asked me to write about the role of Asian Indian women for my thesis. And she said, educate me, entertain me through your thesis. Don't write a thesis, and tell us a story through your thesis. And that became my first book, Waiting for the Perfect Dawn. It took the advice of an advisor, I suppose. And then my journey just, that was the incident that jump-started my journey as a teacher.
For sure. Did you find that you kind of leaned toward one genre of writing, or did you try all of them? Not all, but many.
Yeah, right now, actually, I'm working on a collection of short stories where I am even writing about reincarnation a little bit, but I write about global issues, but I present them through fiction. So a lot of research goes into my writing, but I've never tried a nonfiction except for a couple of essays here and there, which I've shared with people or professors. I'm thinking about writing one, but so far it's been research-based novels, but based on current events or something that's been weighing on our minds as a burden. And I want to, ease that burden by sharing it with others.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, you've written a couple of novels, including Waiting for the Perfect Dawn and Another Heaven, which in itself is incredible. So tell us a bit about the process of writing those books and how long it took or what inspired you to write them in the first place.
Well, so thank you so much. So, Waiting for the Perfect Dawn, as you can see, I have a copy here. This started as a thesis for my master's in teaching at Union College. I went to India, stayed in India for 3 months, and interviewed over 75 women, including my own mother, and collected a lot of incidents that they could recall. And they were aged from about 15 to 85. And this was in 2007. And based on the stories they told me, and based on also the real life struggles one of my relatives faced, and she used to narrate those incidents to me. She was going through domestic violence in her husband's hand, and I promised her that I would do something about it. She's a very dear friend, a dear relative. So I wrote this novel. The title, as the title indicates, there are 5 characters, key characters, and there is a common thread running along, from one character to another or one story to another. They could come together as a novel. They can also be read as 5 short stories. And what I'm trying to show my readers and, my universal audience is that a lot of women before me have struggled to see that perfect dawn, that perfect sunrise, that liberation, getting out of suppression, so to speak. And then the final character achieves that, not because she gets enough help. She gets enough help, which she acknowledges and tells the readers that, if I can do it, you can do it. Mm-hmm. So there is a perfect dawn. It's just, it takes time. It takes cooperation. It takes, as it takes a village to raise a child, it takes the effort of the entire community, global community, to address the problem first. They don't address the problem that women don't have equality, women don't get equal wages, women don't have equal status, as we are seeing even today. And I think the first acknowledgement should come. Once we acknowledge there is a problem, then we can find a solution. So that's how the first novel came about. The second one, Another Heaven, is it took me longer to write that book. I would say about 3 to 4 years, because it addresses both human trafficking and terrorism. So 2 global issues. I was afraid at the time to visit places in India where there were incidents of terrorism happening. I was younger, but I did speak to a lot of grassroots movements to understand why trafficking happens, how trafficking happens. And then my research showed me generally trafficking happens for sex trade or indentured labor. I understood that this is also an excellent vehicle to recruit missionaries for terrorism. So I brought both subjects together, and both the proceeds from both novels help grassroots movements. The second book, especially, every penny raised from the book has gone to grassroots organizations which rescue and rehabilitate victims of human trafficking.
That's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think what you're doing, taking actual information and presenting it as fiction, is also such an incredible thing to do, because I feel like when people read fiction, sometimes they don't necessarily think about the truth behind that. So what you're doing is, I applaud your work. That's great.
I think I really think yes, I write, but the support that I've had from our capital region community, even communities in Dallas and Massachusetts and California, it's incredible how they come forward and ask me, well, I read your book, what can I do next? What can I do to help your cause? How can we raise
Mhm.
funds? So it's I think it's a community effort,
Yeah, for sure.
collaborative effort. Yeah,
For sure.
definitely.
And the fact that your book is raising those questions in people and allowing them to be like, what can I do next, is also great, because that shows that your book made an impact on so many people. So,
Yes, in fact, a couple of my former students did some research on my book Another Heaven for their for one of their courses in college. So, they think they are carrying me with them even after graduating from school, and that is such a precious feeling. When your
mhm.
former student writes to you, Mrs. S. They used to call me Mrs. S. instead of Mrs. Subramanian. You are still with me because I'm reading your book, I'm writing about it. So I think that kind of impact is humbling, and it reminds me that I have to continue to keep doing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah,
It's highly encouraging.
yeah, for sure. For sure. So while you were writing these books, did you ever experience like writer's block?
Yes, I do, because I take on really heavy issues. To be honest with you, while I was writing Another Heaven, some days I would stop at 8 o'clock because the research that I do, the readings that I have to do, would be sitting on my mind like that, and I would take a break. And sometimes, I just run out of ideas too.
Yeah.
So, I run out of ideas, not because I'm tired of it. I think my mind need a refresher. So I go about doing other things. I stop writing for a week or two. I have tea with a friend. Tea is always my go-to, concoction. I love tea. And I have a tea with a friend or talk to a friend. I talk to my daughter. She's one of my best friends, and I talk to her about anything and everything. How and then after talking to her and some soul searching, oh, I forgot to write. I have to go back to my writing. And but even when I don't write, there is always a storage device in the back of my mind that's storing information. When I'm walking, when I'm cooking, or when I'm listening to music, there is something happening. It's nonstop. So I collect whatever information I've stored and then put it in writing again.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a great way to go about it, because I think, especially for me, if I'm working on something, whether it's for school or just separately, and I can't think of anything, just sitting there and staring at a screen or a piece of paper
Mhm.
rarely helps anything. So I think
So it
you're,
happens to you too, right? Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, I think it happens to everyone in a certain sense.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, even for editing, when you write and edit, do you uh, draw back and wear a different hat and come back and edit? Doesn't that help? Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I,
For
I try the same technique here. Instead of approaching it as the writer, I have to come back with a different attitude, and that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So in addition to being a professor, or yeah, being a professor in the past and a current author, you're also an advocate of human rights and specifically women's rights, and you've co-founded the Albany Women Independent Network as well as the We Cedars Foundation. So can you tell us a bit about these two initiatives and why they're important to you?
Yes. So, Albany Women Independent Network, short AWIN, started as a group of women. Um, we kind of put our heads together and came up with a non-profit, not-for-profit platform to see what we can do to talk about bullying in schools, parent teacher, even teenage parent issues. And then we had a few panel discussions on one on how to handle uh, growing up as an Asian Indian in this country. You know, when you're 13, 14, 15, um, life is different here from how the parents grew up in India. You know, see, I grew
Mhm.
up in India and there were no proms or uh,
Yeah.
volleyballs or 10th grade dance or anything like that. So we really struggle. My kids are in their 30s now, but when they were teenagers, especially my son was my first child, it's very hard to come out of that mindset and say, yes, of course you can take a girl for a dance, and and the number of things you have to buy for the dance. No, it's
Yeah.
quite expensive. So it's we are learning along with the kids, about a different culture, and you have to adjust because it's not fair to tell them, well, I grew up in India, so you have to do whatever I did. That's not fair because I'm living here and I have to assimilate, I have to adjust, and just talk about the overarching values of both cultures,
Mhm.
Uh, so as parents, we put our heads together. We did some workshops to talk to parents. We invited some teenagers to talk to the group. We also did group discussion on being Asian Indian woman in the global community. What are the challenges? What are the pluses and minuses? And how do we handle ourselves? How do we handle being a mother and a working mother and this and that? And so it gave us a sounding board. Even practically gives a sounding board to, I'm not alone. So there are other women, mothers just like me, and we can exchange ideas, help each other. So that's how it started. And
Mhm.
then I think based on Another Heaven, there was a dancer in Dallas. At that time, she was living in Dallas. Now she's in Los Angeles. She read the book and she said, I'm inspired by that. And she put together a dance program called Jagrata, meaning beware. And so she asked me to write verses because it's easier to dance to verses than prose. So I wrote some verses for her based on the characters and the events. And she did a fantastic, presented a beautiful performance. And the pilot performance was in Albany at the
Yeah,
Hindu.
what was that experience like?
It
Just
was
being
amazing. I cried. I cried because not only someone took the time to read it,
yeah.
and so even for me to revisit the book, kind of read it again and write some verses based on the climax and some of the scenes that are very heavy scenes. The trafficking scenes are not easy, and so to see that on stage brought tears. It was
Mhm.
very emotional for me. And we raised more than $6,000 for a few grassroots movements. One
Wow.
suggested by the dancer, two suggested by our group. So Avin was behind that. Avin organized. So that was a beautiful fundraising event that Avin did.
Yeah. So what did you take away from that, either as a writer or a person?
Mhm. I think more than that, I realized then that networking and bringing together all kinds of art forms, here I am a writer, and she hired a musician from Chennai, India,
Okay.
to set everything to music, and then she was dancing, she choreographed and danced, and look at the number of art forms coming together to to not only to raise funds, dollars, but also to raise awareness about why it's important to talk about this issue. What can we do as a community? When she presented, one of her narratives was the following. She said, all of you women sitting in this audience, you are the Lakshmis and the Saraswatis and the Durgas, the Indian goddesses. And she said, how can anybody hurt a goddess? Because the goddess is within all of us. Just if you want to look at a goddess, just turn around and look at the person sitting next to you. So, and she made an appeal to everybody through her program. We have to come together, because we have to rescue every Durga and Lakshmi out there who is suffering because of trafficking, or and I also always believe there is a very strong correlation between domestic violence and trafficking. Often, when girls, especially if they are displaced from homes, when they are out of their protective territory, they are really at risk for being trafficked. So we try to bring both together during that performance to reinforce, the importance of constantly talking about this, and doing something about it as well.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So in addition to all these ways you're advocating for these causes and what you've already done, you're also the board of directors vice chair for TRICIA currently. So I'm wondering, is there a way that such community organizations can help to advocate for the causes that you feel strongly about, such as human trafficking and domestic violence, in addition to many other?
Yes. So an organization like TRICIA definitely can bring the local community, assemble the local community to talk about any of the issues that I write about, even writing as a tool. So they used to invite me. In fact, I'll be doing another Zoom presentation soon, to perhaps college essays, or using literature to address human rights issues. My favorite is teaching humanity through literature. I've done those workshops a lot. And so an organization like TRICIA has all the tools, people in their hands to present a program like that, and that can branch off to many other programs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Have they done anything of that sort in the past, or are they looking to do anything of
They are
that?
looking to do the writing program. They have done,
Mhm.
but they have not addressed anything as heavy as human trafficking or something like this. But when I independently do something, or when I get the help of the women under AWIN to do something, they are always there to help me, support me. They come and attend the program, and I'm very thankful for that. But
Mhm.
one step at a time. So we will do something soon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So looking forward, what goals do you have for yourself as an author, advocate, or community member? And what projects do you hope to take up?
So one ongoing project I have is called Annu's Purse. As you may know, we all have too many purses at home which we don't use. So one time I was going through my daughter's closet because she had moved out of
Mhm.
our home. So I was going through the purses, and she told me, Mom, if you need anything, take it. Otherwise, you can donate. I was in the process of donating when I thought, why not fill them with something and then donate? So I sent out a flyer to all my contacts and their contacts about how they can go around the house and choose a used purse. It doesn't have to be a new one, but fill it with travel size essentials like soaps and shampoos, even a granola bar, a pair of socks, mittens, scarves, anything. And take it to a shelter. Okay, so I called some of my friends, and we posted that flyer here and there and put a big box. So we collected about 95 purses filled with
Wow.
essentials for women who have been displaced from their homes. Then I went on television. Somebody called Channel 10, and Mary Wilson interviewed me. After that, we got 400 purses. So look at the power of communication, and someone telling somebody something and somebody telling somebody else. So this purse drive I started, I think, about 3-4 years ago, and many women in many towns are doing that now. I know a couple of women conducted the purse drive, organized the purse drive in California, definitely in Massachusetts. I heard also in Texas. So I'm very, very happy to tell you that that is an ongoing project that I'm doing. And other than that, there will be more. I'm always presenting a topic called Human Trafficking, a Rising Global Tragedy. I'll be speaking to a group of women in California. Have you heard of the organization Soroptimist?
I have not.
Okay, so it is an international organization. There are many chapters across the globe, and there is one in Schenectady, there is one in Saratoga. But this is a very interesting story. We stayed at an Airbnb in Northern California. So that lady is very careful about letting in guests in her home. She has a beautiful home. So she Googled me and found out about my writing and my books, and she read both the books. And she has wall to wall bookshelves. So my books were in the middle of her bookshelves. And she talked about me to her friends, and she is a optimist. So she introduced me to see, look at the women's networking is amazing. I mean, any networking is amazing, but when women take charge, there is nothing they cannot do. So I know about a dozen women in that area because of Kitty, this one woman who happened to read my books, and she's telling people about, go get that book and read. Let's talk. So that is happening. It's nonstop. And these days, Zoom allows us to talk to any number of people anywhere. And I've been to some colleges too, Fordham and other colleges, to speak um, about global trafficking and or trafficking as a global market. So something or the other is going on, but I don't think stopping at any time. I cannot afford to stop.
Yeah, and you've led so many people to become like aware, because I mean human trafficking and domestic violence, obviously people probably know about it, but as you said before, they're very dense, heavy topics that are not necessarily talked about in everyday conversation or even in the mainstream media. It's not really covered very as much as it
No.
probably could be. So I think your books are very important in that you've presented the information in a somewhat digestible format so that people can enjoy the story as well as become informed about what human trafficking, sex trafficking, and domestic violence actually like entail, which is
yes. In fact, I have a very dear friend who will not read these books. She cannot even watch anything disturbing on television. She won't watch television shows. So, but she bought 2 or 3 copies to give to friends. She said, I want to help your cause. I will not read it, but I'm going to encourage others who would like to read it to read it. Which is, I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, of course. Well, so thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you so much, Shruti. I think the opportunity to talk to you. You are a writer, and you have allotted some time for me this afternoon, and I'm extremely thankful for that thing. Really, really appreciate that.
Oh my gosh, of course. It was great to hear about your writing, your advocacy. It's all incredible, and I applaud all your work, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Yes, and I hope we can work on a project together. I'm looking forward to it.
Of course.
Yes.
So, thank you everyone for joining us on this evening of the Asian American Herald. Once again, I'm Shruti Natanma, and our wonderful guest for today was Annu Subramanian. The Asian American Herald is a Facebook-based news media outlet dedicated to discussing topics and building community amongst the Asian Americans in New York. Please share your ideas and look for the recording of this show on our Facebook page. Have a good evening, and thank you again.